Hi and welcome to Simply Ballers 2024-2025 season previews. It's that time of the year where for the next 30 days I'll be releasing a season preview for each team. In each preview there will be a quick season and off-season recap. Then following that we'll be looking at what's in store for each team. We'll be looking at some of the key questions that they have, some of the positives, some of the negatives. It will be digging deeper in some of those areas. And at the end there are some final thoughts with prediction of the standings, their floor, their ceiling, some of the playoff chances, and some other fun predictions. Today we're going for the Detroit Pistons, and I hope this season is the one that they finally push through whatever they have been dealing with the last few seasons, where they finally make that jump. I thought that was last year where I got fooled into thinking they could make the play-in. That was nowhere near the case. They were literally one of the worst team in basketball for so long. They started 2-1, and that was probably the highlight of their season until around mid-January. Because after winning 2 in a row, they went on to lose not 1, not 2, not 3, not 26, not 27, but 28 lost games in a row. You just can't get worse than that. And I really hope that this season will be a lot different. The previous season was just as bad, but there were valid reasons for that. Who could have predicted that Cade Cunningham was going to play 12 games? Who could have predicted that the three top guys in games played would be Killian Hayes and 2 rookies? They were going to be bad last year. But this year they got their best player back. Cade was playing games. Everyone else was in and out. Bojan Bogdanovic barely played. Isaiah Stewart played only 46 games. Duran missed 22. Players were getting traded or cut, and it was the end of the Hayes era as well. 17 different players had played at least 20 games. 24 played at least 10. And then there was the whole thing with Monty Williams, his decision making, his rotations, and it felt like the whole vibe felt off since the offseason. Even when looking at Pistons Twitter, someone was always complaining about Monty. There were so many takes about him on Twitter there. Ivy didn't make a significant jump with him playing less, coming off the bench as well. And there were drops in other statistics. This wasn't a good season for the Pistons at all. There were some positives though. We saw Asar Thompson's rookie season, and that was solid, particularly on a defensive end. We finally saw Cunningham play basketball for the first time in a while, and he looked healthy and he looked good. There were considerable improvements there as well. We finally saw what was expected from Cade early on, but outside of that, it was a typical Pistons season. It was losing. It was just development reps for young players. It was more losing, and that was basically it. Fortunately, they did decide to make changes. They decided to make somewhat improvements in the off season, where they were making moves to get better. They were making moves to surround Cade with better players, better shooting, to improve his whole environment, the whole context of the team. They made changes everywhere. It started right from the top in the front office. They brought in a different management. Troyan Langdon as a president of basketball operations. They hired JB Bickerstaff. There's a new vision, new perspective, and a new philosophy in Detroit, and that may be enough to jumpstart something. Then when it comes to the player changes in the offseason, they focused on getting better by simply getting players that are NBA caliber players. They didn't need to get All-Star quality players. They didn't need to make leaps to get great players. They needed to just have players that can be on the court. Not only be starting level players, they needed players that can make the rotation consistently, because the actual players that they were getting before, a lot of them aren't seeing court time even in the G League. It's going to be a big improvement of going from someone that is barely a G League player to someone that is a legit consistent NBA rotation player. They added Tobias Harris, Paul Reed, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., as well as drafting Ron Holland with a 5th overall pick. That's enough. That's plenty of players that deserve minutes. Because compare them to some of the players that were getting minutes this year. Jordan Roden, Stanley Umidi, Killian Hayes. It's a big gap to jump from those players to even someone like Tobias Harris. Another significant move that was expected was locking up Cade to a 5-year, 224 million rookie extension that could jump up to 269. That was expected. There was nothing else that they could have done with Cade. They shouldn't have moved and they shouldn't have even considered that. This is their guy, and hopefully he does grow into it. So this was a pretty big win for me when it comes to their offseason. Their plan was to establish some winning culture by getting good, solid players. They brought in veterans. There's more shooting to give Cunningham more space to operate in. Bickerstaff did a good job lifting the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers improved each time in his first 3 seasons with him. So there is hope for the Pistons this year. So what's in store for the Pistons this year? I got a few questions. The first one is, how much of the veterans will help this team? Can they help them win some games? Will they raise the floor of this team? Will Tobias, Beasley and Hardaway Jr. be enough to make life easier for everyone on the team? Of course, there's Ron Holland's rookie season. How will that even fit with some of the players they have, especially with Ivy and Cade? Moving on was, what will Cade look like after this extension? Getting an extension worth over 200 million does come with some expectations. Will he take a leap? Can he make an all-star team? And will he look like the Cade that many people expected him to be like before the draft? Is this a make or break season for both Ivy and Duran? Will they warrant get an extension, or will the Pistons consider moving him? And finally, can Thompson improve his offense enough to make all of this look better? The number one thing that will matter the most is whether and how big of a leap can Cade take. Everything revolves around that. Whenever you're a young team looking to go into a rebuild stage, the most important thing is, do you have the guy? Do you have a guy that you can build around with? And that's the first question that will decide everything. If they have Cade as the guy that is worth the extension, that is worth someone that can be an all-star, can be a top 20 player, everything else makes life easy. It makes life easier for everything else. It makes the rebuild much easier because you have the most important piece. It's always going to be tough to judge his game though when he's in one of the worst situations out of any young player on the team. The team is just bad on both ends of the floor, and he hasn't been surrounded by NBA level talent. It's not even about all-star level talent. It's not about someone that can play alongside him. He doesn't have players that deserve 10 minutes per game on an NBA team. Another part that makes it tough to judge his game is the fact that he only played 12 games last year, so there is a gap in his development. The only sample size we have is in his rookie season, which was even in a worse context, and of course he was a rookie that you can't really judge entirely on. But it has been trending upwards. He has developed some of the things that he had issues with. He had added stuff to his game. You can see some of his overall metrics from B-Ball Index. It is trending upwards. He's getting better in some of the finishing. His mid-range talent is much better. His playmaking is always as elite. His three-point shooting went from bad to average, and his overall shooting talent as well has improved. So there are signs of improvement. There are signs of potential, and he's looking good. Considering everything with the Pistons. Digging deeper into some of those improvements when it comes to the overall shooting talents, this is one of the reasons where he has improved in. He has improved in developing that floater. His mid-range shooting, which is needed, especially in this context, has been good to elite levels. He has that pull-up. He's comfortable getting to that shot. All of it, when it comes to his one-on-one scoring, his mid-range scoring, that's needed in this context, is developing well. Some of the rim finishing, that's a big issue. But considering everything else, considering the kind of shots he has to take, he's doing a good job converting here. Number one thing that does need to improve is that rim finishing. Because even considering the context of the team, considering the no spacing, it's awful. It's one of the worst in the league. And I think a lot of that is just him not considering the context of the space and everything else. That's just a big area of his weakness that he needs to work on if he wants to be efficient, if he wants to be a good scorer, and if he wants to be a primary ball handler. Because right now, 71% of his shots are twos. then 30%, almost 30% of the shots are pull up twos. He shot 47% on long mid range, 43% in the short mid range. That's decent. That's around average. But when almost a third of your shots is that, it's not going to look good. That's why he had below average efficiency in 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, effective field goal, true shooting. He doesn't get to the rim a lot. He doesn't finish well, and instead he's settling on those tough shots, which again are needed, but it's not a good thing to rely on, or is needed to be a scorer in this league right now. So that's the most important part of the season for them. It's looking how Cade will address his weaknesses, what kind of things he can add to his game, because that's where it matters the most for them. Will he live up to the potential of the contract? Will he live up to the potential of perhaps being a all-star player? That will make the decisions a lot easier for the Pistons when it comes to the future of this team. But this also means the Pistons need to surround him with better players, with a better environment to make his life easy as well. That's the job of the team when it comes to building around a young player. They need to make his life easier, not just harder for no reason. And that's going to the core of the young players on this team. There are many players on this team that are still young, still developing on themselves. One of them are Ivy and Duran. What do they have in Ivy and Duran? They showed flashes, they showed potential, especially in the rookie seasons. But there are still a lot of questions of how to go about the extensions. They both could take leaps, and this would be the best case scenario. They take leaps. They are definitely part of your core. You pay them, obviously not max, but you pay them a good extension, and you have Ivy, Duran, Cade locked up, and you're settled as a good, solid team that will continue to grow. That will be the ideal scenario, but there's also a world where the jumps don't happen, or they don't happen in a drastic way that makes a clear decision to give them an extension. So then what do? Do you take the gamble and hope that they will break out by giving the extension? But there's also a chance you might be overpaying for a player that will take longer to develop, and that will be eating up the cap space. At the same time, you might be risking the value dropping if they do that. Do you trade? Do you also trade them away a year too soon or a year too late? Do you even look to them? Do you even look to extend them right away, or you just bank on giving an extension later? There are so many different paths, so many very fluid scenarios here that could depend on how well they improve their games. Outside of those two, they still have plenty of younger players everywhere else. There's Holland's rookie season. There's Asar Thompson's improvement on offense. There's Isaiah Stewart. I wonder if there's more to Stewart as well. He has improved. He has been taking a lot more threes as well to develop as a spacing big, but that hasn't actually translated to spacing. So I wonder what's the next step for him. There's Marcus Sasser. That's 7 players that are still young by age or experience that all need to develop. And this is going to be another season prioritizing all of that and just seeing what they have in all of those players, whether they are whether they warrant an extension, whether you decide to move on from them. There's still a lot of decision to be made when it comes to the young players, and this is the season that will likely be a make or break for a lot of them. But finally, this will be a lot about the vets. They obviously made a decision to bring in many vets to help this team. They paid Tobias Harris plenty of money just for this year and next year to make the situation a lot better. Tim Hardaway Jr. has shot 37% on over 12 threes per 100 possession in the last 5 seasons. The Pistons did not have that. They did not have that kind of levels shooting, that kind of spacing. Same with Harris. Harris shot 37% on just under 6 threes. Beasley shot 38% on over 13. That's 3 guys shooting 37% on with 2 of them on high volume. There's still Simone Fontecchio shooting 40% on nearly 10 threes. That's 4 guys that are good to elite 3-point shooters on high volume. They never had that. Those 4 players alone will give them enough space, should give them enough space in 4K to do his work, to make his life easier, and perhaps that will maximize him as well. That will maybe help improve his rim finishing, make him more efficient. One thing that I'll be looking forward to is what we're going to see from Tobias Harris, because there's also potential from him that's beyond just 3-point shooting. He's not in the same role, in the same way, used in the same way as Tim Hardaway Jr. or Malik Beasley, where a lot of their value is provided from the spacing, from the 3-point shooting. He can do a lot more. He has played in bigger roles as well. He has been responsible for higher usage, scoring more on his own. Also, funny enough, his highest volume when it comes to 3-point shooting did come with the Pistons, where he shot 41% on nearly 9 threes. So there's also potential for him to be even more 3-point, be a more high 3-point volume shooter. But he can create for himself. He can play an efficient brand of basketball to some extent. He had over almost like 58% true shooting in the last 5 seasons. Over the last 3 seasons, with Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and James Harden off, he scored over 23 points per 75 possessions, with a 53 percentage effective field goal and 56% true shooting, where he shot 52% from 2 and 38% from 3. That's better than almost anyone on the Pistons when it comes to being a scorer for himself, being efficient, being able to score points, whether it's at the rim or whether it's in the paint or the mid-range. He has been able to do that, and we've seen from him before, whether it was in the Clippers and the Pistons in his previous days, that he can be efficient in that role. So I wonder what his role, his usage, his play style is going to be like this time around with the Pistons in this environment. He's going from a very different position, playing with Joel Embiid and James Harden and Tyrese Maxey, to being on a young team, to being the vet on this team going forward. But now with some predictions, I do think they're going to be much better this year. It's going to be pretty much the same prediction I had last year, where they'll be winning 25 to 30 wins. They will still likely be outside of the play-in, but they will have a chance to fight for that 10th spot. I think right with the improvements of the young players, the additions of the vets, I think they've done a much better job at raising the floor of this team. Doesn't mean they're going to be good, doesn't mean they have a good core that they can build around. It just means they're going to be much better. It won't reach 25 losses in a row. They won't reach even, I don't think they will reach like 15 losses in a row. Their offense should be much better, and that will help K, that will help Ivy, that will help everyone else on this team. I think they will trade one of Ivy and Duran. I don't think they're going to have both of them extended, or either of them. So yeah, my prediction is they will trade one of them at some point in the season. The floor of this team, bottom of the East. They're gonna, if they're bottom of the East, things haven't worked out well. The veterans presence and their impact was overstated. K didn't take the leap, and they're likely just on the bottom of the East. The ceiling, it's securing that 10th spot. It's finally being in a play-in with the chance to be in the 8th seed. If that's the season for them, if they manage to win 30 wins, get into the play-in, give the young players some playoff experience, that's the best possible scenario for them. Finally, I think Harris will have a surprisingly good season and will be one of the best players on this team. I don't know if this is going to be the year. I said that same thing last year, because this jump, this high, their ceiling depends on a 20-game win increase. They're going to need to double their wins at least for that to happen. So I'm not sure if I can see that. It's possible, especially with the Wizards, the Hornets, the Raptors, the Bulls. It's going to be an easy competition to be in that spot. Whether it happens is going to come down to a few games, can come to injury. But let's just go with that. Let's just give some hope to Pistons, and they will make the play-in.